What makes a firefighter helmet truly protective and practical? I'm Stephanie Crowley, and today we're exploring how the F18H Flex helmet from Pacific Helmets meets the evolving needs of firefighters, keeping safety, innovation, and practicality and comfort at the forefront. Joining me for this conversation are Randy Hilmer, National Sales Manager for Canada at Lakeland Fire and Safety, and Lee Glanville Rothman, Business Development Manager at Pacific Helmets. Randy and Lee, let's dive in here. Randy, maybe you can start by giving us some comments on how firefighter helmet design has evolved over the years and what really drives this innovation in this critical piece of safety equipment to set the scene.
Over the years, the helmets have become lighter. They become more protective, more comfortable. There's been demands for them to be easier to clean. One thing that hasn't changed a whole lot over the years is the shape of the helmet. Traditional, at least in North America, the traditional style seems to still be prevalent. What have I missed, Lee?
I don't think you've missed anything. I think you've kind of covered an evolution that once started where we didn't know any better, and something on the head was probably better than nothing on the head. And as we have learnt about the challenges that firefighters are facing and how those situations that they were in have evolved, our understanding of them have evolved. So has the innovation that's been driven back into helmet design. And not only the external shapes, there's a lot of love and connection to the shape of the helmet because it's steeped in tradition. There are generational families that are firefighters. It's what they do, it's what they know. So the shapes are quite formatted, particularly across North America. The changes that came about around protection were all on the internal liners and how we improved that. What systems could we use? How could it be enhanced? I think some of the first firefighter helmets started off as 4-point suspension systems. Some of them barely had suspension systems, so you had this hard shell directly on your head. But we've learned. So that's adapted. Customer, like actual uptake of using the helmets also changed. People used to go in sometimes without a helmet. So we've learned, and that's what we do. We continually look, evolve, and go, how do we do this better?
Can you walk us through the design philosophy for a helmet and how you approach that cutting edge innovation with the practical needs of firefighters? There's got to be a balance there. Can you give us some insight on that?
Our design philosophy was always based around manufacturing and making the best gear. There's no compromise around safety. If we barely got to a pass, that was not good enough, so the team would rework it. Another key concept for our business and how we strive to build up our legacy and be able to provide helmets that not only specifically targeted North American firefighters and firefighters in Canada, particularly with the helmet styles that they like, but globally from jet style European, was making sure that we have the R&D capacity internally. So we've got this awesome R&D team that are focused on human-centered design. They use fast, like rapid prototyping. They look at like iterative processes where they're quickly coming up with ideas. We have our own internal test laboratory that was built at the factory. New Zealand was once upon a time incredibly very far away from the rest of the world. So things used to take months and months before they got somewhere, where that's changed a bit now. You pop a item onto, air freight and it's there within a day or two. But having that capacity to test and validate ideas has been incredible. One of the other components for our team was that you look at these practical applications of here's a firefighter, and some of them we know that they want products that are comfortable. We know that they need helmets that don't make them look goofy. They want to feel good. They're doing this service, so they still want to feel good. They want to feel confident.
Mhm.
And being able to incorporate bits of that and then making sure that we are able to address the safety concerns has been critical. So some of that comes from pushing our thoughts outside the box. Like, how do you think the most absurd idea that could solve a problem and tie that all back in. One of our selling concepts in our helmets is a push to touch eye protector that sits inside the helmet, and you push it up to deploy it and you push it up to stow it. And that came from the team thinking about, oh, well, we just like this idea in a cabinet. And that's part of it. So our team really like to push that level of what's fun and
Mhm.
what's totally outside the box. And in that beautiful, I call it like the space of absolute creativity, you can often find the solutions you're looking for. And then if we take a step back around practical needs, continually connecting with the customer and understanding not only like what we've read, because that's one concept of it. So there's the theory piece, there's guiding principles through standards, but connecting with the customers and really acknowledging what they do differently in each area and how we interlink that into the products is critical.
In building on that, Randy, perhaps you can share some of the considerations that go into making a helmet that firefighters can rely on day after day. Lee touched on some of the comfort and the practical aspects of this, but as she mentioned too, there's also care and maintenance. Can you share some details on that from your perspective?
Yeah, I would start with fit. So it's really important that the helmet gets on the head, fits properly, stays where it's supposed to be. The Haloflex in our F18, it offers that kind of adjustment to adjust the back band, to adjust the height of the helmet. So it's sitting where it's supposed to be. So you don't ever need to worry about your helmet not being where it's supposed to be. You mentioned cleaning, to be able to get the helmet apart, to clean it, to be able to clean the soft goods. So to quickly remove those soft goods, have spares, and then to be able to clean them quickly, clean the helmet quickly, get the helmet back into service, fully decontaminated without any of the long-lasting chemicals that firefighters get exposed to. There's a look for a firefighter, and they want to stay within that tradition.
Mhm.
So there's, two really popular styles in North America. I think in the US, the traditional kind of the cowboy hat look is certainly the most popular. In Canada, it's slightly smaller version, and call it a metro or a modern, but to keep that traditional look, but still, improve the safety of the helmet, decrease the weight, get the perfect fit of the helmet. All those things go into the design and the manufacturing of the helmet.
I'd like to just add back to that, and if you think about how the traditions changed and how what we once knew about helmets has evolved, as Randy's saying, those metro styles came around because people wanted different shapes, different profiles. We needed to reduce the weights. But additionally, cleaning was never on anyone's radar. Understanding the impacts of what a clean helmet meant and the carcinogens, long-term exposure to carcinogens, contaminants, any of the toxins that get trapped in the material components, the inner designs were linked to that. And
Mhm.
I think Randy can attest to this, is that it's quite difficult if you take a helmet from design from 5, 10 years ago, trying to undo all those pieces is tedious. Where
Mhm.
now we've focused on how do we make this simple, because that's a key piece that we've learned is so important and critical to firefighter health, firefighter safety. It's that focus of not just protecting you now while you're in service, but it's that passion of how do we protect you beyond the life of service too.
It was 20 years ago, but I was handed a helmet when I started as a volunteer firefighter that someone else had clearly worn and worn well. And I never even put it on my head. I went and bought myself a new helmet immediately. With what we can do now and clean that helmet, there's no need to replace that shell. You just replace the insides. But at the time, there was no way we could have done anything. Maybe kind of scrub it down a little bit. But so it's come a long way in that regard.
Now, I think we'd be remiss to neglect including NFPA standards here when we talk about helmet development. So perhaps, Lee, could you give us some insight on how NFPA standards play a role in the development and design of firefighter helmets?
Sure. So NFPA is kind of like your stamp of approval. and across Canada and North America, people know that they can trust that brand. So they know that if your product carries that brand, you have put that product through all the paces and all the tests. NFPA helps us in understanding what the performance design criteria should be. Well, particularly they give you guidelines around your design criteria, around the performance, and then they give you the test methodologies. So you're sitting in a space where you understand all the critical components that your helmet needs to meet. They're often based around the NFPA bodies work and research that they've done, where they've understood what the changes are, what's trending. And a big piece that we could look at around protecting firefighters, how that approach has become more consolidated and holistic. Amalgamation of standards, particularly in NFPA, showed us that holistic view and an approach to looking at how all these ensembles for protecting firefighters come together. And that first NFPA 1971 amalgamation was around the year 1997. It just showed that trajectory of looking at these components all together. But it's that holistic view of that your helmet is not independent of, say, the particulate blocking hood. If we look at that in terms of your jacket, your trousers, everything in terms of your bunker gear and how that fits together, we're looking at NFPA 1970 also drawing attention to how you need to clean. So those perspectives of making sure it stays clean, what do you do? And that's quite a big change for fire departments. They've got a lot that they have to address. Firefighters do attend to so many different calls. It's not only structural fires. Sometimes, depending on areas that they're in, there may not be a wildland fire team. So the team might just be attending a big field fire, which they would be dressed in their structural firefighting gear, helmets included, for road traffic collision and incidences that they're attending to, extrication. So how do we, as for us as a manufacturer, we go, okay, NFPA has provided some guiding standards and guidelines. If we want to be in the market and trusted by the market, not only produce an incredibly high quality product, but we need to make sure that we meet those standards and outperform them as best as we can. But how do we innovate? How do we innovate to know that these are all the components that firefighters are dealing with, that your fire departments, your fire chiefs making big decisions around gear and like where to portion the budget? That's a big thing. So total cost of ownership became another key component in how we looked at our helmets. And the Halo Flex, the F18H Halo Flex, although we've made sure that we've honored the traditional look on the external for the shell, but that Halo Flex liner was a huge departure. So from your ribbon set, and Randy touched on this earlier around the helmet doesn't slip as much, it's because there's no longer a ribbon set in there. We've moved towards using inspiration from a very different area, which was looking at concussion protection technology and how some of the advances in that area could be harnessed and used in our helmets. How do we make them fit for firefighters? How do we level up not only the level of protection that's delivered by that impact system? You know, your helmet's there to absorb energy and hopefully not transfer it through. We want to minimize how much gets transferred through the person's head and neck. But how do we make sure that the fire department's budgets are cared for? So total cost of ownership was a big thing for us for the helmets. Randy touched on how easy the internal components are to remove and to replace. They're a quick clip. That was our focus, was how do we make this quick clip? There's no specialist tools required. You could change the internal eye protector out if it got damaged or broken. It's a quick change out within 30 seconds. If it's your first time, it might take you a minute, you know, and if you're really cautious, you might be close to 2, but it's 30 seconds once you've got it done. The padding strips out in under 30 seconds too, and you can have it replaced. So the way that we thought about it and making sure that people had products that allowed them to follow the care standards that NFPA is saying, this is what we should be thinking about to protect you, to keep you safe, to make sure that your body's not being exposed to all these carcinogens and contaminants, became a key thing in that product.
Excellent. Randy, do you have anything to add there in terms of how NFPA standards have, really influenced helmet design?
Certainly, the NFPA standards, for firefighters, that there's so many that they need to follow and learn, and from how they do their jobs to their health and safety to their equipment, to how they take care of their equipment. So, Lee mentioned the consolidation of standards. There's still, fair bit of uh, crossover collaboration, if you will, between standards. So, if the firefighter is going to change the way they do their job, we have to make sure that the PPE and that the NFPA standards also follow how they're changing the way they're doing their jobs to make sure that our PPE is still going to follow that. The committees are made up of firefighters, manufacturers. I'm sure I'm missing people, but they in themselves are a collaboration to make sure that everybody's gets on the same page, making sure that firefighters stay safe, firefighters get trained properly to do their jobs. They learn how to use and maintain their equipment. Lee mentioned structural firefighting, fit for purpose, using the right helmets for the right applications,
Mhm.
using the right clothing when we're, talking about PPE. You don't need to wear structural firefighting gear for anything other than structural firefighters. So the NFPA, it drives change by it recognizes changing needs, recognizes new hazards. Over the years, construction materials have changed. So many more plastics now in the structural firefighter chemicals. So all of these things, they drive the change that the NFPA needs to make, and that the manufacturers need to follow. So
In terms of design and manufacture of firefighting helmets, how do you anticipate and design for this, for these safety challenges that firefighters may face even beyond their active service? And Lee, you mentioned that a few minutes ago, when we talk about, keeping firefighters safe, even when they're not fighting a fire, right? How do we address that?
there's a huge concern now about the exposure to chemicals that do cause long-term health effects in firefighters. The industry has recognized that these are a major concern and they do cause long-term health effects. So constructing the helmet in such a way that is easy and efficient to decontaminate that, so that we're not taking those chemicals home with us and we're not exposing to people at home. We're not continuously exposing them to ourselves. We're making sure that these are easily cleaned, easily maintained. We mentioned field replacement, that sort of thing. It's all so important to prevent firefighters after they've retired or left the service, and that they don't experience long-term health effects. Lee mentioned concussion protocol. We know, in our experience with the NFL and the NHL, in many sports, the long-term effects of multiple concussions, even one head injury, can have serious long-term effects for people. So making sure that the helmet reduces the potential for concussions, so that later in life we don't have issues with long-term effects from concussions.
The part of the helmet that is quite different, and we've kind of teased about it earlier, this halo flex. So what is it? It's this contour design that kind of hugs your head. So it hugs around your head, where if you thought about a ribbon set, that would be suspending. So, we've teased that, like, this is better, it feels nicer, but it's around that, like, so the system on the inside sits around your head and hugs your head, if you wanted to simplify it for the users that we can't really demonstrate the helmet on a head or let you feel it right now. But that focus is quite empowering and quite important. Again, listening to Randy touched on the fact that we wanted to look at how do we make sure you're safe beyond the life of service. And the trends that we're seeing now are because we're educating ourselves, we're opening our eyes, and we're understanding the impacts that carcinogens have on us. We're understanding the impacts of leaving your gear in a truck, or in your car, in the back of your vehicle. I know a lot of firefighters tell me they still do that. Straight out of fire D kit, put it into the back of their vehicle. So it's interesting. Like we want to be part of being connected to what the industry is saying is good practice so that we can help pioneer that. us bringing our helmet to life, which we're very excited because we've got this HaloFlex technology that we're going to keep using in our different shape helmets and hopefully keep evolving our other helmet offerings. So that modern metro style is our next launch, and we're very excited about that, being able to offer that technology that we're getting great feedback on into a broader market so that we can deliver what we've manufactured, what we've created, and our intent to keep people safe, to protect our people. It's getting exciting. You know, the balance of the helmet is one thing that when I joined Pacific Helmets, I learned that balance was more important than weight. 100%, we don't want a brick on our heads. We don't want anything that's 5 pounds. It's not going to be comfortable. But let's look at balance. If you have weight distribution that's uneven on that helmet, it could be the lightest helmet under the sun, but your neck is still going to get strained. So focusing on balance, which is a key part of Pacific Helmet's design philosophy, is what we try and ensure like happens with every helmet. We know that that helmet will be aligned with your natural center of gravity. So the natural way in which you carry your head, your body knows how to do that. So it's all linked. If we take a step back into thinking about that fit for purpose, we spoke about it right at the beginning. If you have gear that's not fit for purpose, that doesn't work, you as a firefighter are distracted during your duty. And thinking about that, thinking about how we can continually improve on gear that's fit for purpose, that definitely works the way that you need it to work. So if we understand you're crawling and lots of things are bumping, last thing you want is a helmet that's flicking, you know, spinning around on your head. But that was part of that HaloFlex and it being revolutionary and game changing. I am confident that we're going to learn more, we're going to adapt it more, and we're just going to keep making this technology better.